G'day and welcome to Daily Insights and Storytellings with me, Moon Willow. It's really lovely to have you all back on again. I am very unclear as to what's going to happen in regards to the energies today. I don't really have a sense. I think that's the thing, that at the moment it's a bit like the timelines. Because when I do a storytelling for individuals, one of the things that I do look at is the fact that I'm unable to tell the future, which is why I don't sort of advertise as being a card reader per se. I'm more interested in how each individual's lives sort of keep going on a spiral and keep going around. And we find ourselves invariably in similar situations, even though I think I was talking about it yesterday, even though we sort of change our external environment, that more often than not, yes, that'll work for a little while, but invariably the things that we keep hidden from ourselves come up, and we have that sense and that feeling that we're sort of back in the same sort of situation, which can become quite distressing at times, because especially if that's in a relationship, we feel like that we know the sort of relationships we don't want to entertain or go into, and then we can end up finding ourselves back in relationship with somebody that's very similar to ones that are no good for us. And I think that comes back again with our relationship with ourselves. And unless we can have a lovely relationship with ourselves, or an understanding and a clarity of our own internal landscape, and have that unconditional love within, that it's very difficult to let the universe know that we're actually looking for something that is healthy for us, that is actually encouraging us to grow and go further forward. Because unless we can unconditionally love ourselves or accept ourselves, we're less inclined to find people that will actually do that for us. We need to work out how that feels in the first place internally, before we actually know what's healthy or what's good for us on an external level, because otherwise it won't match up. If we've got that, if we're hiding from ourselves, or we don't want someone to find out who we are within. There was, for many years, I felt that I was quite poisonous. I couldn't understand why. It was just an underlying feeling. And invariably I ended up with relationships that sort of convinced me that that was true. And it's not true, and I realise that now, but it's taken a lot of looking within and bringing that to the surface, trying to understand where that came from, for me to move forward. And consequently, I have got the most amazing friends that I call my soul family, and that's because as I've learned to accept and love myself, that's the sort of friendships and relationships that I'm bringing into my world. I've always had them, I hadn't noticed, but I'm really, really sensing and feeling that going forward, and really honouring that. And I feel sort of like those of you that are joining me on this particular journey on the storytellings, that we're connecting in that particular way, that as we start to integrate within the feminine, the masculine, the shadow and the light, we can actually start to feel more integrated in a community, and sort of hoping that that's partly what we're creating with these on a daily basis. So for saying that I didn't actually know what I was going to say, I seem to have linked into something. So I'm hoping this is resonating for someone out there. While I think about it, if you haven't already, can you hit that subscribe button, and let's see what today's reading is going to be around. I have a feeling that, but you never know with these crystals. That one jumped in. So we've got solidite. So we're back in our throat chakra and speaking our truth and learning how. So it's not just about how we verbalize, as I was already saying, it's how we speak internally to ourselves and what we expect. If somebody is awful to us and we have that negative opinion of ourselves, we have this sort of internal, oh yeah, well that makes sense because that's how I see myself already. So it's also being aware of how we're communicating with ourselves, and as we're more authentic or real with ourselves, then that will come out more in the conversations we have with other people. So it's that authenticity, but we can't be really authentic unless we've spent time with ourselves to really know what feels right for us and how we would like to express ourselves in this world. And it's sort of like we do come across people with different opinions, but it's also choosing whether it's appropriate to speak our truth at that time or not, or are we just getting into an argument or a disagreement, or agreeing with someone just because it's easier, or we want to have that conflict. Because sometimes, even though we feel like we don't want conflict, more often than not we invite that in from a subconscious level, especially depending on how we've experienced life up until this point. And if our experience has always been that conflict is the norm or disagreements are the norm, that's what we will continue to look for in relationships. So again, as I started at the beginning, it's about really sitting in and learning how to love ourselves, seeing how we actually speak to ourselves with our thought process, noticing what thoughts are coming in, and just sort of noticing whether we want them there or not. And if we don't want them there, or we're noticing that our internal voice is actually being reflected on an external level, we can't do anything particularly about that external, but the internal world we really can. And we can start to sort of notice again where they're coming from and start working with that and integrating it all within. So we'll see how the cards work within this as well. So if you focus, okay, we'll start with that one. And then that one was jumping out. We'll just see if there's a third one that jumps out today. That was many. Nope. So just going to grab the third card. So we've got the clover, a man, and the bear. So within this, the clover is just, as I have said in the past, it's just a beautiful card. It means that no matter how dark or, I don't know, distressing the world seems at the moment, that it's almost like nothing that we do is going to be right, nothing we say is going to be right, that we feel like we're constantly hitting our heads against a brick wall, that, as I was saying the other day, sort of taking a step forward and then several back, that it's like it's an awareness that that's existing, that is part of it, but actually it's not all bad, that actually we're starting to work through everything inside. And so consequently, as we start to learn what our truth is, learn what our authentic awareness and way of being is, we can then step forward in a manner that actually is golden, that will bring abundance in different levels to bring into our world and our way of being. So it's almost like when you start sort of having that authentic conversation with other people, you'll start to meet people with the similar sort of understanding of the universe and themselves and yourself, so that you can actually meet in a more positive way. And you'll start to notice that relationships or friendships that have been quite negative or pull you down or make you feel like you're not good enough or worthy, those will start to disappear as you start to focus more on the positive relationships. And those when you speak your truth, you're actually being authentically heard at the same time. Because sometimes we end up having a conversation with someone and we think that we're on a similar wavelength and we think that they're actually hearing what we're saying. And then it's like in the next breath or a couple of days later, you notice that actually they've not been listening properly, they've not been authentic with you, and it's almost like they're there, yes, I agree, but they don't really. So that can be quite discombobulating, it can be quite upsetting. So the next card is the Man. Again, I mean, I'm very much within these readings that it's not so much a man specifically, but our masculine energy within, whether we're a male or female, we have masculine and feminine energy. So the masculine energy is more quite logical and sort of, so much more logical, abrupt, I want to say, for some reason, but it's almost like that's the part within that's been quite critical, sort of, especially if you're starting to feel emotions. Men are very often encouraged not to feel emotions and not to express themselves in that way. And often as women as well, we have that where if we're crying, it's like people can sort of get fed up saying that we're crying too much or we feel too much. And if you're empathic, then that's very difficult not to do, which is why you need shields up and just sort of noticing how the energies are flowing around you. But it could be that because you're feeling out of sorts, or you're feeling sad or happy or anxious, but you haven't really got an idea as to why that is. It's almost like that masculine energy within comes in and says, well, it's the old one of pull up your socks. Why are you worrying? This is going well, that's going well, the other's going well. And it's like, there's that emotional side of you that's just sort of feeling like, well, I can't explain it, but this exists. And it's acknowledging that that is actually real for you. So going back into the solidite and the throat chakra, it's also sort of speaking with that masculine energy within and sort of saying, look, I understand that you've helped keep me safe and have helped me avoid situations that may not have been beneficial to me. But actually, I would like to try and merge you back into my whole self. Because there is times when we need to have that sort of more masculinity in situations where we can be assertive and speak our truth without any problems, but be able to sort of focus, have an awareness of that, but have that in balance with the emotions, and sort of notice if speaking your truth is making you feel upset, and just sort of having an idea as to where that upset bit is coming from, whether you've tried to express this in the past and someone's come along and tried to shut you down or not listen to your truth either, and just having that difficulty in sort of staying present without getting lost in the old stories and witnessing those, so that you can sort of continue, as I've said before, either take it on or not, depending on what feels right for you at the time. So the next card is the Bear. So this, whenever I see this, I always think of like a mama bear, so very protective. So it's almost within that, what's coming through is a protective of your truth, and sort of noticing the situations where you feel like you're not being valued for your truth, or you're not being heard for your truth, because your truth is real, your truth is allowed to actually be spoken in this world. There's no real right or wrong. There's been no manual to do life. We've just sort of muddled along and made it up as we go along. And at the end of the day, we have to live within this body, and we have to be comfortable with that. So we have to, within the polar bear as well, is having that protective layer and protecting our internal self, knowing when it's time to speak that truth, or just say, look, I can't engage with you at the moment, I need to walk away, so that you don't compromise your internal belief structure and you don't compromise your voice either. Because there are times when it doesn't matter how you express yourself, doesn't matter how eloquent, how true, how real, how powerful you're speaking to somebody else, that other person could be completely shut off and just does not want to hear what it is you want to say. And that can be really quite painful, especially if you're empathic. So it's knowing when to protect your internal landscape and finding those people that we can communicate on a more in-depth level as to what is really true to us. And I'm not saying that we lie at other times, but actually choose not to speak at those moments and just walk away, because it is, nobody else can really protect us except ourselves, especially when we become adults. And it's just learning how to acknowledge those different parts, acknowledge that masculine energy that may be sort of like that negative parrot on your shoulder that can be overly critical. Or there's times when you're tuning into that, where you need that masculine energy to stand up for yourself, and you find that people are actually critical of you for doing that, that you're aggressive, or you don't know what you're saying, or you're rude. And actually it's somebody else not being able to hear that that is your truth. And it's just sitting back within yourself and feeling the intent behind your words, giving breath to it, and seeing whether actually what you want to say is appropriate at that time, or whether you need to wait for another time, or are the words justified? Is it appropriate for you to speak your truth at that point? So it is quite mucky, unfortunately, but it's back to, and I keep going over this, it's back to actually sitting down and spending time with yourself, really acknowledging where different information comes from for you and what feels right for you, and how you would like to actually be heard, and have noticed when people speak to you, whether that hurts or whether that grates or whether that feels right, and notice in yourself if you do something similar, because more often than not we do without realizing, because we live in a very fast society. We're not encouraged to take time for ourselves and nurture ourselves and look after ourselves, and within that we're not given the opportunity to fully appreciate how we feel about something, and how we can give that words, how we can express how we're feeling, and how we would like to live our authentic truth along the way, and how we would like to speak that. So I'm hoping this makes sense to people out there. I'm always really chuffed to see the four-leaf clover, because it is that pot of gold almost at the end of the day. But it's like, we are doing the hard work, we are getting there, and as we walk forward, we're finding more and more people, well, I know that I am finding more and more people who are willing to listen to my authentic truth. And that may change within a couple of hours, a couple of minutes, a couple of days, but it's being open to more information at the same time, and starting to sort of sift it through, and it's like, actually that feels better to me, yeah, I'm not liking that, and sort of accepting and getting rid of things as we go along, because I think that we're constantly evolving as we learn more, so we change along the way. So it just sort of helps with the movement somewhat. So, right. I started this and really had no clue where this was going. So thank you very much for bringing all of your energies in today. And I will see what sound seems to be floating around the ether for us at the same time. So thank you ever so much for joining me. I am available for individual storytellings. Please message me through either my website, which I'll put at the bottom of the description. I can be also found on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Not Twitter yet. Haven't quite got my head around those other 3 sites at the moment. I'm hoping to put out another blog on my website later on today, so if you want to check that out. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, and I look forward to doing this all again tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day today, and love you all. Take care.